Many thanks indeed for staying with us here on the news at 1. Tracking business stories now amid mixed reactions trailing the newly redesigned Naira notes. The World Bank is sending a warning that the new currency may have negative effect on economic activities in the country. The Washington-based bank reveals that this in a new report titled Nigeria Development Update. But the report, however, said the new policy would negatively affect Nigerians, especially the poor, during its timing and short transition period. Also, the report states that small businesses, especially those who do day-to-day cash transactions, will also be affected. It further explains that periodic currency redesigns are normal, and the Naira is due for redesigning, but the timing and short transition period for the denominalization may have negative impacts on economic activities in particular. To the stories now, the Nigeria Electronic Fraud Forum says its overall target is to reduce electronic payments fraud to zero in the nearest future, even as it notes that the incidence is decreasing in the country as a result of steps taken by the forum. Well, the chairman of the forum and director of Banking and Payment Systems, Central Bank of Nigeria, Mr. Musa Jimo, said the level of electronic fraud had been increasing globally. Speaking of the Nigerian Electronic Fraud Forum 2022 annual general meeting held here in Lagos, Mr. Jimo said the objective of the event was to celebrate members who have been fighting the cyber criminals or those that have been terrorizing the country's cyberspace. The Nigerian Electronic Fraud Forum is an initiative of the Bankers Committee to tackle e-channel security challenges as a proactive measure to increase electronic payment transactions across the country.
There are about like between 30-35% decline in incidences of fraud. Remember, there is an attempt and there are successful ones. The number of attempts high, which means that they have been attempting, they are not successful, and there are ones that have been successful and so money taken away. And the recovery, in terms of recovery, we also recorded high numbers in terms of percentage of amounts that have been recovered because of the different initiatives and systems that have been put in place to checkmate all those fraudsters and to track wherever the money is taken into. As we envisage that as we begin to put some limits in the cash withdrawal that can happen on a daily basis, the incidences of fraud will also tame down. Because right now what they used to do is that they steal a huge amount of money and then about 2-3 a.m. they go to an ATM and withdraw everything.
And to other stories now, the total assets of Nigeria's insurance industry have hit 2.3 trillion naira at the end of the third quarter of 2022. This was disclosed by the National Insurance Commission in its Statistics Department quarterly report. According to the report, the industry's gross premium income in the third quarter of 2022 stood at 532.7 billion naira. During the third quarter of 2022, the gross claims reported the market of 242.6 billion naira was slightly lower compared to the corresponding period of 2021, signifying a decline of minus 2.3% in the total claims reported by policyholders. However, it adds the ratio of total claims to gross premium stood at about 46% during the current period. Well, the federal government's revenue from value-added tax, VAT, and company income tax, CIT, rose by 25% year-on-year to 3.47 trillion naira in the first 9 months of the year. That's from 2.77 billion naira in the corresponding period of last year. The reports of the National Bureau of Statistics released show that CIT grew by 26% to 1.67 trillion naira, while VAT rose at 25% to 1.8 trillion naira during the period. In its Q3 2022 CIT report released by the NBS, the company income tax rose quarter-on-quarter by 13% to 810.19 billion naira in Q3 2022. Well, similarly, the NBS VAT collection reports for Q3 shows that VAT increased by 4.0% to 625.39 billion naira from 600.15 billion naira in the second quarter of 2022. Let's shift attention now to the global markets as the yen surged and Asian shares fell sharply today after the Bank of Japan's decision to allow long-term interest rates to rise more, a move analysts say could signal a step towards challenging changing Japan's long-held yield curve control. MSCI's Products Index of Asia Pacific shares outside Japan was down at 0.9%, while Japan's Nikkei stock index shared at 2.2% after trading positive territory earlier in the day. Australian shares extended earlier losses to be off by 1.27%, and Hong Kong's Hang Index was down at 1.4%, while China's CSI 300 index was off at 1.15%. In early European futures trading, the pan-region Euro Stoxx 50 futures were down also 0.89%. And German DAX futures are down at 0.91%, FTSE futures down at 0.63%, and the S&P 500 E-minis were also down at 0.52%. But the Dow Jones Industrial Average fell at 0.49%. The S&P 500 futures also lost at 0.90%, while the Nasdaq Composite also dropped at 1.49%. And following the policy twist by the Bank of Japan, BOJ, the yen surged to a 4-month peak against the dollar today, keeping a broad policy settings unchanged. It widened the level band for long-term yields to 50 basis points from 25 basis points. Now, speaking of the policy tweak, the Bank of Japan Governor, Mr. Haruhiko Kuroda, emphasizes that the change was not an interest rate hike, but to improve bond markets' function. He further explains that markets volatility has heightened from around spring, keeping the 10-year bond yield from exceeding the 0.25% cap, which caused some distortions in the shape of the yield curve. He also states that now is the appropriate timing to correct such distortions and enhance market functions in the continent. Let's wrap things off now with crude oil prices on the international market as it inched higher today, supported by a softer dollar and a U.S. plan to restock petroleum reserves, but gains were capped by uncertainty over the impact of rising COVID-19 cases in top oil importer China. U.S. West Texas Intermediate crude experiences a downward price margin of 0.47% to sell at $74.84 per barrel. Brent futures rose to sell at $80.31 per barrel with an uptick of 0.64%. And Bonny Light is also selling at $78.67 per barrel with an upsurge of 1.46%. And for the OPEC basket, crude oil dealers are offering $78.73 per barrel with a price decline of 2.16%.